Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome into the show. If you haven't noticed, today I'm doing the show with a little bit different of a background. I'm recording outside because it is super nice in Texas today, Dallas, Texas, and I figured why not get outside for a little bit while I record this video. Anyways, guys, I'm going to be giving you 5 players that I hate today. I know it's more exciting to talk about the players that we love, but it's just as important to avoid the landmine. So I'm going to be talking about 5 players that I need you to avoid drafting at all costs because – well, they're going to cost you your league because they're going so darn high that they could actually ruin your fantasy season if you draft them. So I want to make sure you avoid these guys. But guys, real quick, I wanted to make an announcement before I get into the content. I am relaunching my Patreon for this channel, if you didn't know, and the Patreon League is officially open for the 2025 season. We're doing a 10-man league, and it's going to be $800 for first place and $200 for second, $100 buy-in. So the spots are going to fill pretty quick. We're going to be drafting August 3rd, but the league is going to fill way before that since I'm advertising it so early in the offseason. So make sure to hop on the Patreon, join the Patreon if you want to get in the league with us. You're also going to get my draft guide and my rankings if you join the Patreon. So I'll put the link in the description below. Join the Patreon, join the Patreon league, have some fun with us this season, and let's get it. So I'm going to be talking about my first player out of these 5 players, and I want to make sure you guys avoid drafting. Now, if you get my draft guide on my Patreon, you're going to see how much I don't like T. Higgins. I write an entire profile on why to not draft this guy. And you look at last year, 2.07 yards per route run, not bad. 24.9% team target share. But the fact remains that this guy has never had more than 1,100 receiving yards in a season. Had he played a full season last year, given the pace he was at, probably would have exceeded 1,100 yards. But still, he really is a guy that gets hurt all the time. He's not going to stay on the field for you. If he does, he's still just a mid-range wide receiver 2 at best. Giving up way too much draft capital, drafting this guy in the second round. I absolutely hate his value. And what's causing people to draft him so high this year, I think, as opposed to previous years, is because he won a lot of people money in best ball last year with that Week 17 explosion. He had 32 whatever fantasy points. I think he had like 34 fantasy points for a half PPR format. Went absolutely nuclear in Week 17 last year, so that's causing people to overdraft him. But this guy is nothing more than a wide receiver 2, a mid-range wide receiver 2 at best. I would avoid drafting him in round 2 at all costs. He's one of the worst values in the draft, and you got to make sure you avoid this landmine. Do not draft T. Higgins in more than 3 or 4% of your best ball leagues, and I wouldn't touch him in redraft. Next player on my list is going to be Brock Bowers. Now, this guy obviously led all tight ends in targets, all tight ends in receiving yards last year. He kind of had a Sam Laporta type rookie year, except even better. This is one of the best, if not the best, rookie tight end seasons that we've ever seen in fantasy. So it's causing people to drop Brock Bowers very high. But what we have to look at is this. He's probably not going to have the same kind of season this year. And in order for him to return value where he's going in the draft, he has to be the tight end 1 again. He has to be the tight end 1. If he's not the tight end 1 in all of fantasy by a pretty significant margin, he cannot return, value going at the 1-2 turn. The 1-2 turn is reserved for running backs and wide receivers. Call me biased to a certain position. A player has to be very good. A tight end has to be prime Travis Kelce to justify going at the 1-2 turn or going in the first round of fantasy drafts. And Brock Bowers isn't quite that. We only have a 1-year sample size, albeit the year was very, very good. I love this guy going at the end of round 2, but going at the 1-2 turn, he's a massive landmine. He's going way too early for a tight end, not named Travis Kelce. So I just don't like the value this season. I think he's going way too high in drafts, and I'm going to be avoiding Brock Bowers at all costs because you can wait and get a guy like Trey McBride at the end of the second round or the beginning of the third, and Trey McBride is going to give you the same upside, if not better. In fact, if I were to project out the offenses this year on who I think is going to be a better offense, between the Raiders and the Cardinals, I think the Cardinals are going to have a better offense. I really do. So I think Trey McBride is also going to see some positive touchdown regression and get in the end zone more. I think Trey McBride will score more touchdowns than Brock Bowers this year. If Trey McBride scores more touchdowns than Brock Bowers this year, given his target share, given his efficiency as a tight end, he's going to outperform Brock Bowers. Why not just fade Brock Bowers and wait on Trey McBride or even wait on a guy like George Kittle? Next player on my list is going to be Joe Mixon. Now, Joe Mixon, obviously coming off a monster season, 17.2 fantasy points per game, 9th in the NFL. But this guy has never averaged more than 5 yards per carry in a season. He's never really been that efficient of a back. But because of his prototypical workhorse build. He's always been given the lead role in an offense. This might just be teams being biased to backs that look like bell cow backs. I think this is a guy who does have talent, not top 10 talent or anything like that, but maybe top 15 talent at the running back position. But he's always been a little bit overrated from a talent perspective. Obviously had a great year last year, but this dude's aging. We know that running backs tend to kind of fall off a cliff at the age of 28. This dude's going to be 29 to start the season. I think we're going to see the wheels start to fall off for Joe Mixon a little bit. He's never been that efficient of a back in the first place. There's all kinds of question marks with the Houston offense, although I think that Stroud and Nico Collins are going to help the offense bounce back this year. I really don't like Joe Mixon. He had 12 touchdowns last year in an offense that wasn't that good. So you got to figure that the touchdown numbers are going to regress negatively a little bit, and he wouldn't be anywhere near top 10 in fantasy points per game if he didn't get in the end zone 12 times. So I don't trust it this year. I'm going to be fading Joe Mixon in round 3 or 4, wherever he's going. The draft capital is just way too high. Next player on my list is going to be Baker Mayfield. No, I don't want to hear anybody give me crap about Baker Mayfield because I was the one saying to draft Baker Mayfield when he went to the Bucs, and he had 2 good seasons to start his career, had a great career on the Bucs, had a great season last season, finishing 4th in, overall fantasy points. So this is a guy, who's been even a little bit better than I expected when he went to the Bucs. Obviously, maybe the most loaded wide receiver room in the NFL with Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and now the added Emeka Egbuka. But this dude doesn't really give you true rushing upside. He had 378 rushing yards last year, which was by far his career high mark. He does have that deceptive ability to scramble, but he's not really a rushing upside quarterback. He's not going to give you, 8+ rushing touchdowns or anything like that. In fact, he had 3 last year. Probably look for something similar to that this year. He's not a quarterback that's going to get in the end zone a whole lot with his legs. So the rushing upside isn't there, and he's being drafted at the quarterback 7. This happens notoriously every season in fantasy. If you have a quarterback that's coming off a monster passing season, but he doesn't give you truly elite rushing upside, he usually almost always regresses negatively by a significant margin. We saw it with C.J. Stroud last year. We see it with quarterbacks like Jared Goff. They'll have a monster season, and then they'll regress a little bit after that. Now, loaded offense. Can he be a top 12 overall quarterback? Yes, but going off as a quarterback 7 with no rushing upside, and he's probably going to have some inevitable passing number regression just due to laws and averages. I do not like Baker Mayfield going as a quarterback 7, and there are much better quarterbacks that you could get way later in the draft. Just wait and draft an upside guy like Justin Fields. Take Anthony Richardson late. Don't take a non-rushing upside quarterback that is inevitably going to regress a little bit in the passing game as well as a 7th overall quarterback off the board. Next and final player on my list is going to be Rasheed Shaheed. Now, Rasheed Shaheed was obviously crushing last year before he went down with his injury. 13.6 fantasy points per game. The dude had a 50.3 air yard share in his offense. Obviously, at the time, well, even from a season-long standpoint, that's the number 1 air yard share in the entire league, a 50% air yard share. But this is a guy who thrives on the deep ball. He really isn't ever going to come out and command 10-plus targets a game. Now, I think he's way slept on as far as a talent perspective, and I think the teams should feed him 10 targets a game, but it doesn't mean they will. What we've seen in the sample of his NFL career is that he is big play dependent. We don't like to draft big play dependent players that are only getting 4 or 5 targets a game. That's very much what he was, and we have absolutely no guarantee at quarterback with Shove or however the hell you say his name coming in to replace Derek Carr. And, we just are more unsure about this quarterback room than we are about any quarterback room in the NFL. So I really don't want to be drafting Rasheed Shaheed because he's too big play dependent. And I think we're going to be avoiding him going in the middle rounds because there's much better wide receiver values. And there are wide receivers that are going to outperform him significantly that are going in like round 16. The dude's a massive landmine. I do not want you guys drafting Rasheed Shaheed. Avoid him at all costs. All right, guys. Appreciate you tuning into the video. Catch you later.